Well, hello everyone. We now know who's going to be playing in the college football playoff. We're starting to get some word about some of the players that are going to leave school at the end of the year and declare for the 2017 NFL Draft. The NFL season is well into December and we're getting into playoff mode. It's a perfect time to give you an updated 2017 NFL mock draft. Now, this is only a one-round edition. I can't remember if I frankly promised a 2 or 3-round version before. I can tell you that the next one I'll spend more time on, because this one I did kind of quickly, basically on a good shit, pretty much. Some of you might argue is what most of my mock drafts are, but nonetheless, you can check out my 32 picks for my one-round mock in the description box down below. Now, some of the things that will stand out to you. First, the Cleveland Browns taking Myles Garrett, number 1 overall. I've bounced back and forth between taking a quarterback, taking Jonathan Allen, taking Myles Garrett. This has nothing to do with the reports of the Browns are enamored with Myles Garrett, because I've had them taking Myles Garrett and Jonathan Allen in previous mock drafts. What's going to be really interesting over the last 3 weeks of the season is to see if the Cleveland Browns decide if they want to win a game and see if they ultimately end up with the number 1 overall pick. That's what's going to be interesting to see. But leave it to the Cleveland Browns, where they could have just sat put and taken Carson Wentz and changed the trajectory of their organization long term. They passed, they traded, and now, of course, they're in a position where they can get a number 1 overall pick in a draft where it looks like the quarterback class leaves a lot to be desired. And there may not potentially be that marquee franchise guy that could change the fortunes of the Cleveland Skid Marks. Only Cleveland could pull that shit off. Well, frankly, other teams could too, but nobody does it better than the Skid Marks, that's for sure. So in this case, I've got the 49ers taking DeShone Kizer at number 2. Who knows what the hell's going to happen with Chip Kelly and whether they're going to keep him, who he would prefer at the quarterback position, if they would take a quarterback here. I don't freaking know. So just to make this mock work, I put Kizer at number 2. I've got Jonathan Allen going number 3 to the Jaguars. To me, I prefer Jonathan Allen as a prospect over Myles Garrett. I think he's the better football player. I think he's potentially the better NFL player. I think in some ways it's kind of like hearkening back to a couple of years ago, Jadeveon Clowney and Khalil Mack. I thought people were crazy for saying that Jadeveon Clowney was better than Khalil Mack, but that was just me apparently. No, it wasn't. There were other people that agreed too. But I look at it as somewhat similar, although I like Myles Garrett on film more than I do Jadeveon Clowney. And I don't know that I like Jonathan Allen as much as I like Khalil Mack, but I'm still a very big Jonathan Allen fan. But for Jacksonville, what do they need? They need a general manager who can get it done. They need a head coach and coaching staff that doesn't suck, which is the bigger problem. For some of you that say, how is it the general manager's fault? Ultimately, the general manager hired the head coach, did he not, that put the crappy coaching staff in place. So you can talk about the talent that's been acquired, and there has been some nice talent that's been acquired, but it's not the type of talent that has led to a winning formula for the Jaguars in 2016. And they also need Blake Bortles to not suck. Maybe some progression in this game, would be nice. Just saying. In this particular mock draft, I've got the Bears passing on a quarterback at number 4, taking Malik Hooker, the safety from Ohio State. I know Hooker has said that he intends to return to Ohio State for his redshirt junior season. I'll believe it when I see it. I'm just saying, to make this mock work for now, I'll probably keep Malik Hooker in my mocks until that declaration deadline officially passes, or he officially says for 100% for sure, not, I plan on returning as of right now, is I will be returning next year. But you look at the Chicago Bears, obviously quarterback is a huge need. They have needs on the offensive line. They have needs at wide receiver, at tight end. They're a shitty team. They have needs everywhere. Defensively, their biggest need is a playmaker in the back end of that secondary. I'm tired of watching Bears games and see their safeties not be mentioned, do absolutely nothing, have no impact on the game as a run defender or in pass defense. They need an Ed Reed type of presence in the back of that secondary. They really do. They need somebody to pair along with Leonard Floyd to build this defense around. And Malik Hooker would be that quarterback of the defense. He would be a stud that the Bears desperately, desperately needed. It would help get that Bears defense a lot closer to the elite level than maybe they'd be given credit for. I've still got Fournette to the Jets at 5. I don't know that I fully agree with Fournette being the best running back in this draft class, but It is what it is now. A lot of mocks are probably going to have the Jets taking a corner, and I understand it, and I get it. But at some point in time, you have to invest a first-round pick on the offensive side of the ball. You have to. And how many years now have the Jets spent their first-round pick, or in some drafts, picks on the defensive side of the ball? And look at what the return on the investment is. You brought in a defensive-minded head coach in Todd Bowles. He should be able to fix the secondary without having to give him yet another first-round pick on the fucking defensive side of the ball. Why don't you get a young potential difference maker on the offensive side of the ball that can lead your organization for the next 8 to 10 years? That's what you're looking at with a guy like a Leonard Fournette. As I've talked about before, though, with this mock draft and just the draft in general, the secondary class is outstanding, especially if a Malik Hooker decides to ultimately declare. You've got 3 safeties going in the top 14 picks. Some of you may be surprised by Jabrill Peppers being at 14. Don't be. That's probably more realistically where his draft range potentially is, because some teams are going to question what his best position is. Some teams are going to question if he has the ball skills to be a safety. Some teams are going to question if you could really risk running him at a linebacker position, especially in a 3-4. Ultimately, is he more of a role player type of guy? Heisman finalist does not necessarily mean he's going to be a stud at the NFL level. I'm not saying he won't be. I'm just trying to give you what NFL teams could potentially be thinking. And before you sit there and go on you don't know what the fuck you're talking about, you're crazy. We literally go through this rigmarole pretty much every single God blessed effing year. Like in this past draft, who was somebody that was being mocked really, really high, and I said people were crazy? A'Shawn Robinson. He ended up going in the middle of round number 2. The year before that, all the mock drafts had Randy Gregory going in the top 5 or the top 10. I had him going, I think, like at the end of round 2, beginning of round 3, and that's where he ended up freaking going. All the mock drafts talk about Robert Nkemdiche. I was frankly surprised he got drafted in the first round at all. But for all the mock drafts for months that were having him in the top 5, top 10, I said that was crazy, and I was right. So we could disagree sometimes on my evaluations of prospects, but in terms of having kind of my finger in the air and being able to feel which way the wind is blowing on prospects, you got to give it to me. I'm pretty fucking good. And by the way, I'm the one that sat there October of last year, before a lot of people even knew who the fuck the dude was saying Carson Wentz was the best quarterback in the 2016 NFL draft. Some of the smart asses will come back and say, well, what about Dak Prescott? Let's see what Carson Wentz would do with Ezekiel Elliott, Des Bryant, Jason Witten, Cole Beasley, and most importantly, that fucking Cowboys offensive line. Just saying. But I look at a guy like Peppers. I think he's a good player. We'll see if the way fans view him is ultimately the way NFL organizations view him. I'm a big fan of Zach Cunningham. As you see, I've got him going 12 in this particular mock to Cincinnati. In terms of other things, I've talked about a lot of this stuff before. Running back class is good. This time I only had 3 going in round 1. If you're going to sit there and talk about players that I've left out, yeah, players are going to get left out. And like I got to remind you, this is still only mid-December. I've only really begun to start watching these guys. I've just finished doing my return viewing of DeShone Kizer, if you will, because as a Notre Dame guy, I watch all the Notre Dame games, so I already have a good feeling for him, but that's watching it during the game. I wanted to go back and watch more specifically just for him. I wish Equanimous St. Brown was in this draft. Oh, my goodness. But you'll see the DeShone Kizer scouting report video coming up soon because I'm wrapping it up now, as a matter of fact. So this is my mock draft. Like I said, the secondary is a really good draft class. Running back, again, really good draft class. You have a few notable wide receivers that deserve first-round consideration to be John Ross, Mike Williams, Corey Davis. But, not as good of a wide receiver class as you may be seeing in recent years. But, again, that's where it's going to be. It's going to be about Garrett and Allen, and then Kizer, and then Trubisky. There's going to be a lot of talk about those guys. Trubisky I've ultimately got going to Cleveland at number 10. So at the end of the day, Cleveland still gets their guy. I've seen some things talk about Trubisky wants to be the quarterback of the Cleveland Browns. Godspeed to you. And frankly, if I heard somebody saying he wanted to be the quarterback of the Cleveland Browns, I would question his intelligence and his sanity and probably would run as far as I possibly could from him as an NFL prospect. But with that said, in this case, the Browns would still get their guy. So maybe it works out for him. Maybe it doesn't. It probably doesn't. Instead of taking Jonathan Allen, they'll take Myles Garrett. Instead of just maybe staying put and taking DeShone Kizer, who ends up being the better player, they try to sit there and say, we'll wait for the quarterback again like we always fucking do, and then we're surprised 2 years later when it busts out. That's why they're the skid marks of the NFL. Enjoy this mock draft. You can leave me your comments and ask me questions on Twitter if you want them.